Hi everyone, Sean Humphreys here. Welcome to this edition of the Take Charge of Change podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we're going to talk about why change, transition, and resilience training is a little bit different than the typical training that organizations deliver to their teams to help their teams to be more productive and effective. So you'll enjoy this edition of the podcast. So it's really interesting when we talk about training regimes, training programs, training protocols. A lot of organizations will, embrace the issues of wellness and health and that kind of thing for their staff. I mean, ultimately they're motivated, I think, by productivity gains and return on investment. So hopefully we can find a balance between those two priorities. On the one hand, organizations trying to be efficient and productive with the resources that they have, and the staff being having the feeling that they're being treated fairly, that they're valued, and that their employer really is looking out for their best interests as much as possible. So one of the things that we talk about at Take Charge of Change is the fact that as our teams and as our staff are negotiating their day-to-day work life, they're doing it in the context of sometimes very significant pressures that are going on in their personal lives. And so what we've done is we've put together training programs that are designed to help your staff and your teams deal with those pressures. So let's talk about this. We'll unpack our model a little bit so you have a clearer sense as to what our training is about, what we're trying to achieve. So the first thing that we talk about are sort of the macro forces that are impacting people. There's political forces at a macro level that impact us, right? So politics is pervasive in our culture and in our media. Ultimately, it's the political process that drives policy. That policy then eventually trickles down to have direct impacts on our lives. Economic impacts. And so being in the wealth planning industry, part of what I do is to talk to my clients in wealth planning around the impact of the economy, economics, the impact on capital markets. And so those big forces come down eventually to have an impact on the individual. Societal changes, and so whether we look at family structures, community structures, how people organize themselves socially has an impact, and then the environment has an impact as well. Now, one of the things that I didn't write down here, but is a huge one that almost envelops all of these, and that's the impact of technology. Okay, so these macro forces are coming down on us all the time, and although they may not be direct impacts, they're indirect impacts that will create inertia and challenges in our life potentially. Then we look at the micro changes that we call them micro changes, and basically the micro changes are essentially the things that happen in our own personal lives that can create challenges, that can create stresses, that can erode our productivity professionally, even erode our health personally. And so some of those forces can be life changes like retirement. So retirement would be a great example, changing our work and professional roles within an organization or leaving an organization and going to a new one. A real big one that we're seeing clients deal with is aging loved ones, helping them negotiate the care system and greater dependency needs, and it's having a big impact on that baby boomer demographic. Of course, baby boomers, and as people age, have their own personal health problems, and so we go through this period where we maybe have relatively good health. As we age, we start collecting a series of dilemmas and concerns around health, and so that has an impact. And of course, we go through other major life changes. It could be separation and divorce. So all these forces are swirling around us. Sometimes there's periods of relative tranquility, and then at other times we are going through multiple challenges, both at a macro level as well as a micro level. So kind of did this quick little schematic for you to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So we have at the bottom here going through the various changes in our lives, right? And so we could have graduation from university or college. It could be starting a family. Our career is now in full throttle, and then eventually we transition to retirement, and then we deal with our own aging. And of course, there's a cyclical nature to this, right? It's not always positive, it's not always negative. But as we go through these challenges, there's no doubt that there can be peak experiences, which are amazing, and then challenges. And as we transition through each of these areas, it's sort of on this oscillation of good and bad and challenging. But as we go through those things, there's no doubt that as we go through the trough, if there's challenges on the negative side of these transitions, if we handle the transitions effectively, there can be new understandings, new development in our lives. It could be cognitive, emotional, relational, it could be physical, where we do a reset. We learn a lot through these challenging periods and transitions in our life. Now, on top of that, we have these economic forces, we've got societal forces, we've got the environment, we've got, obviously political forces, and like I said, we've got the whole tech issue that kind of surrounds us. And so what we want to do when we work with organizations is, first of all, let's just recognize this as a reality. I think a lot of times organizational leaders will put in place benefit programs, employee assistance programs to help people cope with the pressures that arise from these transitions and challenges in their world. What would be better is if we put in a protocol in advance of these challenges during periods of tranquility. You're not always going to hit that. We can't control what comes into our lives. But as an ongoing part of training, helping people to have a working model on how to navigate through transitions. And transitions are different than just changes. Changes are things we can negotiate. Maybe we have a to-do list, specific strategies, and we get through the change. Transitions are different. Transitions are both an external and an internal reworking of how we view the world and our role in the world, and they can be transformative, both on the positive and on the negative side. And so we want to give our staff a working model for how to negotiate transitions, and then surrounding all of this circle is really representing this notion of resilience training. So what can we do in the lives of our staff to make them more resilient, more change ready and transition ready, both psychologically and emotionally and relationally, financially, looking at their own cognitive health and physical health. All the things wrap into this notion of resilience, the ability to respond to change, to come through change, not to be derailed by change, and even become stronger and better and more effective as a result of change. So if I've piqued your interest, reach out to us. We'd love to start a conversation about how we can craft specific programs for your organization so you can help your professionals and team to be more change ready, to be resilient through transitions in their life, and to have an ongoing model they can use to view transitions effectively and productively, and to build their personal resilience through an ongoing training program. Be resilient.